Welcome, thanks for joining me, astrologer Patrick Arundell, for the latest of my deep dive series. Today I'm going to explore the Pisces supermoon, the second in the current series of supermoons, and this occurs worldwide on the 10th of March 2024, 20 degrees and 16 minutes, so just into the third decan of Pisces, which is subruled by the passionate Mars. In fact, Mars is going to be very influential on this event, but Pluto plays a big role too. I'm going to share with you some of the mythology behind this sign, give you a flavour of the archetype of Pisces, but also if we think about it, the sun and the moon coming together in unison as they do in a new moon. They're known as the luminaries, but a new moon is actually a dark moon, so we have a paradox there. Also, because new moon energies are great for setting our intentions, the sign of Pisces is the 12th and last zodiac sign, and the date of this particular event only occurs 10 days before the start of the Western tropical astrological new year with the spring equinox. So although we're thinking about something that's new, it's a lot to do with the more reflective energies of Pisces. So that's a paradox too. Now I'm recording this from a town in Wales which has a great association to the sign of Pisces, and also the great mathematician and astronomer and astrologer Robert Record. The person who can work out who it is will get a free draconic natal chart. You can write to me with your thoughts on that. But first of all, what I want to do is share with you the event chart based on solar and also then on natal. And then I'm going to go through each of the 12 signs from Aries through to Pisces to give you a flavour of what you can expect over the next 4 weeks. If you're new to my channel, thank you for joining me. This is very much a community. If you have any thoughts, please share them. I try to interact with each comment. If you're a returning visitor, it's lovely to have your company once more. Your likes, comments, shares and subscriptions are all gratefully appreciated. If you've yet to subscribe, please do so and click or tap on the bell notification symbol, because if you don't do that, you won't get the alert. So Pisces supermoon occurs on the 10th of March 2024, sharing on the screen now the exact timings for all the big cities of the world. At 20 degrees and 16 minutes, just into that third decan, so as I mentioned before, subruled by Mars. But also at this point of that third decan, there's another rulership known as the 12th harmonic, so we have another Mars influence there, or another Scorpio influence, because in terms of the Dward in Vedic astrology, this too is influenced by Mars. So we could say the passion links with the emotion of the sign of Pisces. The archetype of Pisces is of course very much to do with flexing, can be very compassionate, very much to do with healing, sensory information, our psychological, spiritual and emotional development, and our investment in any kind of faith, which comes from Jupiter, its traditional ruler. The Neptunian energy is much more to do with the lack of boundaries, and because we've got the planet of boundaries in Pisces at the moment, Saturn, that makes for an interesting contrast in itself. The name Pisces means fishes in Latin, and the constellation shows in the sky the two fishes connected by cords or lines. Now, the myth behind this is that Aphrodite and Eros were being chased by Typhoon and jumped into the river to escape his unwelcome attention. Now, some stories have it that the gods turned into fishes and swam away, and others that two fishes carried them to safety. But there is a paradox with Pisces, I feel, because as much as there can be huge compassion and a kind of limitless amount of energy and sacrifice that Pisces people can give to situations when someone is taken for granted over a period of time without recognition. When Pisces decides enough is enough, well, there can be an absolute opposite energy, I feel, which is much more to do with the cooler, more detached vibe of Virgo, the opposite sign. So when Pisces people withdraw, it really can be like a coldness. I rather feel it's like the trout at the bottom of the pool looking up suspiciously as the angler casts their bait in, and the trout is quite aware what's going on and is watching it in a very calm but cool way, and is not going to take the hook. I think many of us have a kind of energy of Pisces in us at a point or a time, whether we're watching a movie, very much to do with Neptune, or we're reading a book, the escapism, enjoying a glass or two of nice wine, making merry. Very Piscean energies, but of course it can be linked very much to healing, to withdrawal, to illness, to feeling very disconnected from others, from feeling abandoned. And the 12th zodiac sign, or the 12th house, can be to do with secret enemies. So I feel that what we get with the sign of Pisces and the sun's journey through it is a time to really appraise what our previous 11 months have meant to us. We can all do this when the sun's going through the zodiac sign prior to our ascendant or our sun. So if you do have a different sun to the ascendant, as many people do, not all, we can have our own Pisces endings, as well as this one, which is more to do with us collectively. Now, in terms of that little teaser I gave you, so I live in Dimbach Pisgod, and that means fortlet of the fish. But whoever writes in first and nails it in English, then there be the person who gets that free draconic natal chart. But I feel that Pisces energy can be a dichotomy between devotion or desertion. But this part of Pisces, because of that more robust energy of Mars, gives subjects an ability to bounce back from setbacks, but have a tremendous passion and appreciation for the arts, creativity, imagination, visualization. So it's a really lively part of the sign of Pisces for sure. Now I'm showing on the screen now the solar event chart that we can all collectively relate to, and that obviously puts the sun in house 12. There you can see it at 20 degrees 16. Now Neptune's pretty close. If you were looking at this chart in terms of, if I was working with a client, obviously I'd be very conscious that Neptune is only 7 degrees or so away. But I like to keep things very precise for these videos. So for me, the standout influence is definitely the sun and the moon. Midpoint, of course, are in that direct sextile with Uranus. So Uranus is the planet of provocation, of surprises, very restless, electric energy, and the sign of Taurus, the host, very much to do with land, agriculture, self-worth, everyday money. So it's possible that in a more positive context, the energy in Pisces here suggests that the experiences that we've had over a period of time in terms of our emotional experience and knowledge, but most of all our instincts, if we couple that with some fresh approaches to our resources, or even how we look at our own self-value, that can be a very positive part of this particular new moon experience and how we set our intentions for the next 4 weeks. But I mentioned before that Mars and Pluto are very powerful too. Now you can see that Mars in the solar chart is in the 11th house, of course, in Aquarius at 2011. So that's in a right angle with Uranus as well. So that's a much more turbulent, tension building aspect, very abrasive, because we've got Mars, the hustle bustle energy of Mars is squaring up to Uranus, and that can make us much more impulsive. It also could push us in some ways with Pluto and Venus in Aquarius to sort of dive into our social situations in a more escapist way, so overindulging in order to escape the reality of some other parts of our existence. But there is actually a really great link between Pluto in Aquarius and Mercury in Aries, which has only just arrived. And that's brilliant for penetrating into the core of situations. So we can try to use that to slow down the more potentially reckless energy that Mars can bring to Uranus. So, as I mentioned, a very Mars-orientated event. We think of Pisces as being shimmering and ephemeral and somehow lacking a kind of fixed energy that we can grip onto, which may be true, but I feel that there is going to be a lot of emotion around this event because of it, the Sun and the Moon just in that third decan, sub-ruled by Mars, connecting with that first 12th harmonic, which is sub-ruled by Scorpio, which of course traditionally is ruled by Mars. And we have Mars applying to Uranus, which the Sun and the Moon apply to as well. So there could be some turbulence, as well as some using our instincts and past knowledge and experiences in some kind of fresh way. But what about the event chart from a Placidus viewpoint? The ascendant is Gemini at 4 degrees and 22 minutes, but whenever an astrologer looks at a natal chart, one of the primary important things to notice is the most dominating planet of the chart. And in this chart, it's Pluto, because Pluto is right up there on the 10th house cusp. Now, this is based on Greenwich. Other astrologers may do an event chart based on their local situation and come up with a different ascendant. But in terms of universal central time, so something we can all collectively relate to, Mars is very dominant, and it's in the 10th house, which is very much to do with power, but Mars is in the 10th house too. Mars in the 10th house can be very dominating, even in the more egalitarian Aquarius. So what do I think of that? Well, I think what we've got is a big shift going on in the world, because I feel there has been, if I could be really honest, a bit of a myth that's been perpetrated by some people that Pluto moving into Aquarius was suddenly going to solve some of the extremes of Pluto in Capricorn. But remember, Pluto is about deconstruction, and the regeneration can only happen after we've had the deconstruction. So the fact that Pluto is right at the top on that 10th house suggests that collectively, because the sign of Aquarius is about us all, this is a time of huge change, and we're not quite sure how it's actually going to unfold. And because Mars is up there in the 10th house as well, there may be players using power and leverage and force in not necessarily a good way in order to dominate other people. And you can see that Uranus in the event chart is actually in house 12. So that suggests that things could be going on out of immediate view in terms of asserting that power that could be quite sinister and not very good. And this could be at a state level. So you don't need me to point out to you some of the players who could be involved in that. But in terms of the moon and the sun themselves, the unison between them is in the 11th house, which is very Aquarius. And then the position of Uranus in the 12th. So we have 10, 11, 12. So I feel this particular event, and you can see how all the planets are crowded into that top left-hand corner of this wheel. You can see that this event tells a story in itself. We're seeing a lot of power being used, a lot of transformation about us collectively, the 11th house, but we're not quite sure how it's all going to play out in terms of our psychological well-being, but also our sense of security and who can we really trust. So I feel in some ways this event, if we look at it more from a natal viewpoint rather than a solar viewpoint, suggests there's quite a lot of fear, a collective fear that is being perpetrated and is being emanated at the moment. So what can we do to draw in and draw down the goodness? Well, I think it's really believing in the more faith part of Pisces. So the energy of Virgo is very much about the practical world, about how we function in a very organized, systematic and efficient way. Pisces is not like that. It's where we have to listen to instincts. So if certain situations arise for us where we're not quite sure what to do, take it down to the gut. If there are some very profound things from your past that come up into your consciousness at this time, rather than shoving them to one side or thinking, well, no, I don't really want to talk about things that are controversial or fearful or tricky, we all actually need to embrace and really come together as a collective in terms of our support for one another. And one of the great ways to do that is a terrific Piscean quality of compassion. But if we box ourselves away and try to isolate ourselves in that other polarity of Pisces, to be cold in order to cope, I don't actually think that that helps us very much to deal with these huge changes that are going on, because it's around financial transactions, it's around business, it's around employment, it's around politics, or it's around our health. The pollution that's gone into our rivers and seas is something that Saturn being in Pisces is going to reveal at an ever quicker level. But of course, if we see action to put these things right, then that would be very satisfying. But this is where money, if it gets too much in control and overpowers the true motive or the true need for a more caring way of dealing and approaching things, that isn't necessarily a well-balanced world, nor enables us to live our lives in a well-balanced way either. So this particular new moon, it is a paradox. It asks us to reinvigorate our approach to the shadow side of our natures, the bits of ourselves that we find a little bit difficult to integrate in. It may be that we do need to look at some past wounds and hurts, and maybe some things that we did to other people that weren't so good, and look at them in a more honest, spiritual way. And that all prepares ourselves for that rush of great fire that's going to be coming on the 20th of March with the wonderful spring equinox and the start of the astrological year. So some big transitions going on in society at the moment, big transitions going on in the world in general, but a lot of big transitions going on in ourselves. So if we celebrate the healers, celebrate the healer within ourselves, but also appreciate and respect that not everything has to be tangible or proved, because our gut feeling, the feelings of our pets, our animals, our instincts are so attuned because they're hardwired into us over thousands and thousands of years. It's not good to ignore these things. Bring them in, integrate them, and that prepares us for the new off in just 10 days' time. Please stay with me as I go through each of the 12 zodiac signs from Aries through to Pisces. But if you would like to gain more understanding and information about what makes you tick as an individual based on more serious astrology, if you give me 3 pieces of your personal birth data of time, date and place, or date and place if you don't know your time, I can produce for you your life roadmap report, which will give you searing insights into what makes you tick, but also a much more intimate understanding of how to work with the energies you were given when you were born, totally unique to you. But also my special package, you can get 30% off and get your 12-month transits report. So that's the moving planets in the sky interacting with your unique blueprint. Please see the link below for more. So Aries, it's interesting for you that Mars is in such pugnacious form in a way, because in that right angle to Uranus, you could see you feeling quite determined to push back and certainly be free-spirited about managing your resources or hanging out with the people you want to hang out with, even if some people might have a few judgments at this time. But it's also important to know that with Mercury having just edged into your sign, you are beginning to see the start of the new story, which will accelerate by the time the Sun enters your sign on the 20th. And that's really gratifying, particularly that Pluto is supporting Mercury. So there is a big picture shaping up for you, but it's a big picture that's shaping up in a different way to what you thought the big picture was before Saturn moved into Pisces before March last year. So if we go back to the start of 23, where you are now, I don't feel was quite where you expected to be. Now, it may be that you've been able to actually use Saturn's arrival in Pisces to quickly let go of what was no longer serving your purpose. But I just sense with Neptune and Saturn being there that even if you're trying to inhibit a new space or a new approach and being very dynamic and progressive, there will be some things that see you just stepping backwards, almost like 2 steps forwards, 1 step back. And it might be a lot to do with legacy issues that are not directly to do with you. It could be people around you need your support. It may be that that your own energy has been afflicted in some ways by your industry, and it's been difficult to get the rest and reflection that you've needed for you too. So it would be a good thing if you can, before the time the Sun moves into your sign, to certainly have some moments of deep thinking. If you're someone who does meditate or pray, or really gets into very contemplative states, that's really going to be terrific for you, because you're going to pull that energy in. But the chances are you could feel a bit on edge with that Mars squaring up with Uranus. But then, ironically, of course, the Sun and the Moon are embracing Uranus and asking you to use those past skills, experiences and knowledge in that fresh way. So it just depends on your unique circumstances, but you mustn't be too hard on yourself if you're feeling suboptimal when it comes to your vitality. This is a period that you need to work through gently. And if you are someone who's quite hard on yourself, if you're not functioning at full pelt, don't be too demanding of yourselves. We all need moments to pause, and this is a vital moment for you to pause. If, on the other hand, a big job or a big relationship has come to a close over the last year, you may still be working through it, and it may not be completely clear exactly how the path ahead will lay. But the thing with yourself is that when you're on top form, you're terrific actually at listening to your instincts, and it's a quality that I don't feel that gets covered in astrology enough, not popular astrology, because the impulse of Mars means that if something appeals to you or puts you off, the chances are you're going to react quickly to it. So you are listening to how you feel. You just may act in a quick way. So there may be something that you are still working through, but you've got the opportunity, particularly with that conjunction between the North Node and Chiron, which does dominate the whole of March this year, and it's the first for 55 years in your sign since 1969. So it can be a really important time to embrace some of your vulnerabilities, your fears, some health issues that may have got neglected, whether it's going, for your annual dental health check or so on, inoculations. This is a good time to really grapple with all of that. So Taurus, a Pisces new moon for you, is very much about getting in touch with the higher part of your being. Because over the last year, Saturn has probably shown you that some people have been somewhat disappointing. and maybe some of your own hopes haven't quite been met in as scintillating way as you would like, then again, maybe you've developed a much more resilient and realistic understanding of what the future can hold for you, which is what the 11th house is about, and therefore this new moon. But it does seem that somehow or another you're wanting to strut your stuff around your work with Mars and Pluto and your ruler right at the top of your chart in the 10th house, but you can't force it. And I think that's the key. Be imaginative, connect to people who share your vision and values, tune in, tune up. Some things that were important to you a year ago possibly have lost the appeal. It doesn't mean to say you don't want to recreate success in other ways. You may just be in the process of regenerating a new sharpness of where you're going to move forward. So there may have been something you got towards or embraced, and it was a big thing that was important to you, but then you realised that you changed in journey, which is something that I think happens a lot to all of us. But also this can be an opportunity to think about your friendships, but maybe you could find yourself wanting to preserve your independence. So maybe some sort of more informal meetups, maybe even romantically, to be honest, with Mars in the mix, might really appeal to you. And your attention span could be a little bit low, but if you can focus on your longer term, that's going to be the key at this time. So Gemini, it's interesting that your ruler Mercury forges such a perfect link with Pluto. Mercury, along with Chiron and the North Node in House 11, is about your future plans, your network, your higher ideals. Can be about your social interactions. Can be about good fortune, I must stress. And Pluto is in that part of your situation which has given you a big appetite for new knowledge, new information. It's not to say you didn't have it before. After all, you're a very curious sign. But maybe your attention span has been a little on the low side at times, traditionally. And Pluto's asking you to sort of think more philosophically about life. Big knowledge, big data, as they say. I have a friend who's interested in all of that. It's big data. And so a lot of knowledge is coming your way, but it can all be fed into how your role is perceived by others and how you connect to the wider world. Now, of course, for many of us, that mainly comes through our work. But if you're someone who's quite active in your local community, or do something voluntarily, or you have some kind of leadership role, then within the fabric of your community, then you really can find yourself in the limelight at this time. It's just that all of that may create a little bit of stress with Uranus's square with Mars, because Uranus has been a bit of an aggregate for you, I feel, over the last 5 or 6 years, with finding it difficult to sleep and switch the adrenaline off. A lot of cortisol going around for Gemini type people. And that's great if you're someone who doesn't need a lot of sleep and loves to be stimulated. But if you're someone who has found it more and more difficult to sort of really recharge your batteries, at times you may have felt a little bit exhausted. So Mars in that right angle to Uranus is just kind of saying that don't overdo it at this time, even if it is around important goals and ambitions. You need to pace yourself. And perhaps having Mercury in your 11th house is just suggesting that maybe get in contact with some good friends and meet up and just forget some of those worldly responsibilities and obligations. Cancer, the new moon totally in isolation, is very much about new frontiers. It's about exploring. And it's about maybe booking that vacation, if it's somewhere quite popular that you have to get your reservation in and confirm it. Maybe it could be to do with something more cultural, like learning a language or embracing a greater connection to the arts. If you are going to be visiting anywhere, the chances are that it won't just be enjoying nice food and, you know, local cuisine. You may want to really check out the more historical context of wherever you visit, even if it's part of the holiday. But then again, there's another part of you that may just want to be a bit free and a bit more independent in your life in general. Maybe head off, do a bit of journeying just within your state, territory, county, and just, you know, have a bit of a road trip and some musing, doing some more freedom orientated pursuits. Could be really, really good for your soul. Now, let's just look at the aggravant, which is Mars and Uranus in that square. So Mars for you is house 8, shared finances, can be sex, and Uranus 11. Is there somebody in your social circle that you're finding a bit hard to resist at the moment? The chances are that this could be, you know, really sort of quite dramatic stuff. Even if you're someone who's usually super cautious about relationships, someone could be making your pulse race quicker. And funnily enough, if you are hanging out with different types of people at the moment and it's non-romantic, that can be like a breath of fresh air. But there may be some impulse around you at the moment, which is a bit uncharacteristic. But you are such a good manager of things, whether it is your resources, the domestic scene, your work, your relationships in a way, because you're very protected with the moon. There's part of you at the moment that wants to be a bit more rebellious and actually a bit more rock and roll. It sounds quite exciting. Give me a ring, we'll meet up and go for a drink. So Leo, the new moon in its tight defines is house 8, what you share with other people, where you're most invested emotionally or financially. Can be about business interests, legacies, inheritances, pensions, wills, all that kind of good stuff. Now, it is important for all of us to visualize what it might be in our future when maybe circumstances change. So if you don't have contingencies in place and you do have, you know, a family or a busy lifestyle and you have the resources, you know, it would be a good time to do that kind of planning. I mean, in the UK, you can have wills that are produced for free by some of the charities if you make a donation. I'm not going to say the charities, but I've seen it in the papers that you can make a donation in the will. I don't know how much it would be, and they do the will for free. So that's a really nice idea if you're massively into pets or into you know, supporting famine relief and things like that. That's really a lovely thing to do. But thinking about those long-term areas that we can't control when the vital point is reached is something to be really good to do at the present time. Now, in terms of your professional situation, the 8th house is how we bring the money in, but the 10th house, where Uranus is about how we connect to the world itself. So have you been going through some big changes over the last 5 or 6 years? I did mention this in my last video for Chiron and the North Node, because it really wouldn't be a surprise if you have found yourself shifting away from something that you had to, you know, you've done for a long time and you really are good at it, but you're wanting something that's a bit more edgy and challenges you. And that is something that there may be a link around. But because of the energy in your 7th house, your relationships are important. So the other part of this chart could be that if you're not feeling very valued or well paid in an existing situation, and you've got a boss who demands a lot of you and is quite forceful, you could find yourself being much more outspoken than you have in the past, with Mars in your 7th house, which really is about setting boundaries, and Uranus in the 10th. Virgo, collection of energy in the 7th house. It's all about relationships. How are things going? You know, whatever your status, you may perfectly be happy on as a single person. You may be in a relationship which is going fine. You may be wanting in a relationship that's developing to get a bit closer and more invested in it. And certainly this is a new moon that can help all those things. But it would be wrong of me not to mention that with Saturn in the 7th house, if the converse is true, you're not very happy with an existing relationship. You don't feel heard. The fact that Uranus is in that 9th house, which is very much about individual freedom, and is squaring with Mars, at the very least can see you being, I'm not doing that. I've done too much on the domestic scene. You've got to do more. But that could be with your kids if you've got them, or your flatmates, or your lodger, as much as it could be with a partner, or it could be at work. No, I'm always covering and doing that extra bit to support you or other colleague. And you could find yourself really being much more on, reinforcing what you will or will not accept over the next month. Good for you if so, because once you get the respect going, that can bring the right kind of connections your way. But there could be some change, positive, perhaps a bit choppier, just depends exactly on your situation at the present time. So Libra, a lot of energy in Pisces. Saturn, the moon, the sun, Neptune, all in the 6th solar house of your situation. That's about responsibilities, obligations, life details, being virtuous, making sure that everything's running tickety-boo. And we've had a little bit of sun here at last in Britain, so a great opportunity to do some decluttering to achieve that on the back of this particular event. Set your intentions. But someone asked me on YouTube in a written comment, what's the difference between the 6th and the 10th house? Well, the 6th house is the processes of the job. The 10th house is the actual role. So the 6th house here means that if your job or your role or life structure feels a bit mundane, what you could be looking for is some excitement. But having your ruler Venus, Mars, and Pluto all in your 5th house gives you the opportunity to bring some creativity, passion and personality to that more mundane part of your situation. So for you, it's ironically it's a bit of a Virgoan new moon, but what we can do is use the host, the sensitivity and the sensory energy of Pisces to make it work. So if there are parts of your everyday routine that feel a bit stuck, listen to your instincts to try to change things. So if you do a job, for example, that doesn't feel very rewarding, but there's a lot of demands, then think about changing it. And the fact that Mars is in a square with Uranus could definitely see in a romantic situation you pushing back about being taken for granted. So if someone's just going through, it all seems a bit perfunctory, it's just going through, yeah, we do this, there's not much sort of drama or sort of pash. You're craving some pash at the moment, and that pash can be in an intimate sense, or it can be in to do with your daily life structure. So something needs to be shook up to make things that much more exciting for you, but at the same time some reforms and some greater self-discipline may be needed as well. Perhaps around chocolate, calorific goodies. Yes, well, with my Libra and Ascendant, bang goes my late night snack then. So Scorpio, the new moon itself is in house 5, and because it's in that 3rd decan and therefore has that sub-rulership of your traditional ruler of Mars, and Mars is in the part of your situation to do with how you feel about things with your other modern ruler of Pluto, the emotion of your situation at the moment is highly charged with Mars in that right angle with Uranus in terms of relationships. So if you don't feel heard emotionally, or someone seems a bit distant, or you don't feel really engaged by the person you're with in a more feeling way, you could actually like them, you may even fancy them, but there's not much of an emotional connection. This is a new moon that's going to make you, or push you, provoke you to be a bit more conscious of why that may be. And is this an area that you can work on? Are your boundaries and defences so strongly set that you find it difficult to open up to people. If you do, then it's difficult for them to reciprocate. So it's a lot to do with trying to get the emotion flowing, but at the same time expressing your joys, because that's what the fifth house is about. And I feel particularly with love and romance, as much as laughter and attraction and doing glamorous things can all be very important, there's not much better than just feeling really comfortable with somebody. So if there is someone that is catching your eye at the moment, let that be your guiding principle. So Sagittarius, the collection of energy in Pisces, is house 4. If you are living somewhere that feels a bit cramped in, you may want to do something to change that. It may be physically moving the furniture around. It may be doing a bit of feng shui. I actually believe that can be really helpful. You know, if we have mirrors opposite windows, it's pretty basic, isn't it? If we're glancing the light out, that's not so good. So maybe think about things, reappraise things, even if you're massively into all of that. This could be time to just really reset things in terms of your home environment. But there could be some changes for some archers in terms of where you live itself. So I can resist that. So there may be some thought of changing actually where you live, moving altogether, redecorating, doing some physical or structural changes. Could be somebody leaving home, somebody returning home, perhaps talk about adding to the family. All these things are big subjects for the fourth house. And of course, since Neptune moved into your fourth house in 2012, followed by Saturn last year, things have really changed, and you know there's a big focus on this part of your situation at the moment. You want to feel really comfortable in your bones, in your emotions, which is we all have our inner home within ourselves. So that's an important theme for you as well. But Mars in that square with Uranus could make you very restless. So space is always important to Sagittarians and Aquarians. And so, you know, if where you live in or the immediate environment around you is not quite your cup of tea, you may be thinking about reviewing that if you are able to, and changing it over the next month. So Capricorn, this is a new moon which can give you an opportunity to interact and engage more with people immediately around you. There could be a surprise text message or email, or you may decide to upgrade your tech or even your mode of transport. If you do enjoy cycling, the third house is very much in tune with cycling. And if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, great time to leap on the bike, get down the gym, do short bursts of powerful cardiac exercise, because that is very third house. You know, particularly if you're somebody, you know, that likes to do a variety of different things rather than, you know, one long, more endurance orientated type of sport. So the other thing about the third house is it can be quite sexual. So, you know, you could meet up with somebody, a friend, coffee, catch up on the news. A time to be pretty lively about sharing your ideas. There is that collective in the second house, and with Mars in that right angle with Uranus, this could see you impulsive about spending money. So if you have been eyeing a new laptop or phone for some while, you may find it difficult not to splurge over the next few weeks. But in another way, the third house new moon connecting to Uranus can see you with a great opportunity to express some unusual and brilliant ideas you've got, especially if you're someone who's really into trends, whether it's around music, fashion, cookery. You can be right on it, whether as a user or as a sharer of information. So Aquarius, this new moon is very much about your self-worth, your everyday money, and also your values. Saturn has been applying a handbrake for a year and 3 days since your traditional ruler moved into your second house, and things probably have changed a little bit. Your relationship to resources, your relationship to your values, you may have got a bit more firm about what you believe in, got your shoulder behind things, develop more resilience. if some people in the past have thought you've been maybe a little bit flaky or a bit out there with some of your ideas, well, you're owning them. Well, yes, and I saw the trend some while ago, and good for you if so. But also, maybe there has been some contraction. Obviously, expenses have gone up for many of us. And this new moon is an opportunity to re-engineer things and get things moving again. And because you've got 3 planets in your sign, a great chance to do that. But just don't rush into anything with Mars in a square with your modern ruler, because just putting a load of hectic energy into an area quickly in order to try and get a result might not work quite as well as the patient, systematic approach that Saturn really does reward all of us most from. But that link between Mercury and Pluto is very, very encouraging if you are talking to other people, trying to work collaboratively, share ideas in a way that can be mutually beneficial. Pisces, well, obviously it's your special new moon, so that's absolutely glorious. Being in the 3rd decan, I think this gives you the opportunity to be more, to be bolder, braver about your fashion choices, how you might approach getting your hair cut, a time to sort of really galvanize yourself forwards in lots of different ways. The complexity really is just having those 3 planets in the 12th house. So as much as you probably would like to be totally in the moment with all that energy in the sign of Pisces, there's still some stuff, maybe deep stuff, and maybe it's going to go on certainly to the 2nd of September with Pluto, but Mars in the 12th house can see your emotions a bit up and down. And maybe if you hear a snippet of information, or someone you feel is saying something about you, perhaps online, that you feel is unfair, you may find yourself reacting in a really feisty way if you feel that they are not being very fair or kind to you. But in a more positive way, the link between the new moon and Uranus gives you the ability to be a real agent for change. So maybe that energy in Aquarius is you actually recognizing that some things from your past, they may have the tentacles in your present, they may be important. That doesn't mean to say you're not going to experiment and try something new. So if you are approaching a new beginning in your life, it can be a really, really exciting one. But you are being reminded, as much as being in the moment, which is very 1st house, very ascendant, very Aries, also very important to just bring with you that part of you that can be very sensitive, very conscious of the unspoken energies that are around that a lot of other people miss. But certainly if you wanted to set up a business as a therapist, a healer, that you've been educating yourself on for some while, or perhaps have got past skills and experiences that have made way for, the dull old day job, you could be actually thinking of bringing them out, dusting them down, updating, re-galvanizing yourself and setting your intentions in quite a dynamic and exciting way. Go for it if so. It's been a real pleasure being with you. Thank you so much for joining me, and all the best for this Pisces new moon. Take care and goodbye.